Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Zakiya Thomas. Tonight, we're talking with Jennifer Carroll Foy, former delegate for Virginia's 2nd District and leader of Virginia for Everyone PAC. Jennifer was also a candidate in the July Democratic primary here in Virginia. Tonight, we're focusing on the election that's tomorrow for statewide candidates and delegates here in Virginia. Jennifer, thanks for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me, Zakiya.
So I'm excited because for the primary in particular, we had 2 Black women on the ticket. That made my heart excited. As a Black woman, you know, our votes are often taken for granted, but having 2 Black women as options was important for me, and I think it's important for a lot of folks. So thank you for running. I appreciate everything you did and everything you've done since then to help elect Democrats up and down the ticket. So if you want to give us a little bit about what you've been up to since the primary and how you've been helping Democrats, then we'll talk a little bit more about the election and why this is so important here in Virginia.
Absolutely. So immediately after the election, and Terry McCullough won the nomination as the Democratic nominee, I went straight to work and restarted my PAC, Virginia for Everyone, and created a paid canvas program because I know how important grassroots organizing is. It was important to our elections in 2017 when we were on the cusp of winning the majority. And to me, I think we did, except for a name being drawn out of a bowl. And then in 2019, we were actually able to make it happen. There was all of this energy that was supplied by all these organizations who came in and did paid canvas programs, brought in the volunteers, the energy and excitement that we needed to drive out our base, because we all know the best way to get Democrats to vote is volunteer to voter contact, making sure people have a plan, they take a friend, and that they go vote. So having that here in Virginia was extremely important to me. So my Virginia for Everyone PAC is a paid canvas program where we're knocking over 35,000 doors in key districts to build out a multiracial, multi-generational coalition of supporters and voters here in Virginia, focusing on women and people of color and millennials and hard to reach places, even in some rural communities, because their votes matter as well. And they could be the difference between a win and a loss. So that's what's important. And that's what my Virginia for Everyone PAC has been doing, been raising money and gaining volunteers in order to make that happen, to make sure that we keep the trifecta here in the Commonwealth.
So let's talk about that trifecta. So right now we know that all I'm seeing in the news is the polls are so close. Personally, we've seen that public polls aren't always the most accurate, but it does give you a sense to pause. So what are you hearing out there? What are you seeing out there, especially with your PAC and that you're knocking doors? What kind of energy are you seeing? What can we do to light that spark? Because as we're going to talk about, this is very important. So I want to hear what's actually going on now, and we can talk about why it's so important.
So what I'm hearing at the doors initially was a lot of apathy, right? We have to acknowledge the fact that Virginians were tired. You know, they're exhausted from being sheltered in place, the pandemic, the economic crisis. It's hard to focus on an election when you're about to be evicted. Mm-hmm. But that's where I use that moment as an opportunity to ensure that every voter knows that the reason that we have the first Southern state voting rights, the reason why we have the first LGBTQ plus protection and employment accommodations in the South, on a road to have 100% zero carbon emissions standard. We've ended pregnancy discrimination from legislation that I passed and the Equal Rights Amendment that I've been able to pass. And with the work of so many other great Democrats, been able to increase the minimum wage, gone from dead last in this nation for workers in Virginia just 3-4 years ago to now 23rd in just 2 short years, but we're not done yet. Making sure that people know that that's what's at stake, that's what's on the ballot. And all of the progressive gains that we have made in Virginia can go back in a matter of moments if we do not show up at the ballot box. So that's what's important. So the way that you beat apathy is with excitement, is with energy. And it's creating that energy by reminding people what Democrats have done. There are 2 things that we as Democrats have to do better at, and it's messaging and it's strategizing, right? You know, the thing is that Republicans fall in line, we have to fall in love. And that means more resources, more time, more energy, more effort. But we have to keep people hopeful and optimistic and inspire them in a way that our opponents do not. But again, that takes, you know, grit and sweat and hard work. So that's why these grassroots, you know, organizing is so important. the contact is so important, and making the case at the doors is pivotal.
I love that line. So Republicans fall in line, we need to fall in love. That's a great way to put it, because we don't want to use fear to motivate, like Republicans across the board. That's generally been the tactic, and it's worked. If you get people fearful of they'll lose something. If I gain something, that means someone else has to lose something. And so we need to change that mindset. And I think the way you do that is having those open and honest conversations about it. So we were able to make a lot of progress based on what you said in the General Assembly. So let's talk about how this impacts that progress. So we have a Republican at the top of the ticket. We have Republicans up and down the ticket who have a variety of views, but a lot of them are antithetical to some of the work and the progress that we've made in Virginia. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have these protections in place, that there were more efforts to suppress voter participation. And we're seeing this across the country, right? How many states are now building or creating legislation to deny folks like you and me and millions of other people actually the right to vote, reminiscent of some earlier Jim Crow laws, right? And so this election is important. The work you're doing and talking to folks is important for that reason. So let's talk a little bit more about some of those gains and how is it that the General Assembly and the statewide election, so we have the whole House of Delegates that's up for election. How does that impact? How is this election going to impact our ability to continue to push forward legislation in the General Assembly and make sure we get bills passed going forward?
So we're only up 5 seats in the House of Delegates. We have a slim majority, so we can't afford to lose any. And the way to the supermajority is through seats such as Deborah Gardner in the Richmond area, Katie Sponsler in the Colonia Heights area. It's in those seats like Jennifer Kitchen. I think if we can really, communicate enough, the votes can be there, but we have to pay attention to those districts. So that's how we get to where we need to be, because where we need to be is in the majority. I have served in the minority and the majority, and I can tell you the majority feels good, because in the minority, you're begging for crumbs and for scraps. You're trying to make bad bills a little less bad, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, let's harm not so many people. Right. Let's not be so offensive or egregious in the policies that we're passing. Whereas when you're in the majority, you get to say, these are our values and our principles. This is the policies we're going to pass. These are the people we're going to help. And it's a wonderful place to be. It's a powerful place to be. So we can actually execute our values and get done at things that we have promised our base and our constituents for so long. So this election impacts us because we can't afford to lose any seats. Our margin is so low, and the more Democrats we have, the better. The more voices get represented, the more things that we get done. I am, cautiously optimistic about tomorrow. I am hopeful and prayerful that the right thing happens, and that we not only hold the line, but we pick up hopefully 2 to 3 seats. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. This election is unlike any that I've ever felt. The energy feels different. The environment is different. What's happening on the federal level does somewhat impact people's opinions about Virginia and how they feel about voting and whether or not they're energized and excited or not. It's not everything, but it does matter to some. And just, people, just their response has been different as well. So more towards your question, how does this election impact? It impacts everything. It impacts where we stand, what policies and bills that we can pass, because we still have some unfinished business. We didn't get done the entire Democratic agenda. We still need to do great things like repeal right to work. We still need to pass a Virginia Green New Deal. We're right on the cusp of making that happen with the Virginia Clean Economy Act, 100% zero carbon emission standard in the next several years. But we can do better. More investments in the clean car program, setting up electric vehicle infrastructure charging stations all throughout our interstates and highways, increasing minimum wage. We get to $15, but maybe we still have to take another look at it. We still get there in another couple of years. So $15 5 years from now is different than $15 today, as we well know. And to that mom with the 2 kids working 2 jobs, I could tell you that $15 will feel different today than it will in 5 years. So all of these things are things that we still need to get done. Paid family medical leave. There's just so much, and everything rides on whether or not we hold the House at the end of the day. We still have a slim majority in the Senate. Right now, they're good for the next 2 years. We have to make sure we bring home the house, and we need the governorship because they are responsible for being that brick wall, protecting our rights, because they can, veto bills that are no good, and they can use the bully pulpit to ensure that policies that we need are passed. And then, of course, we need the lieutenant governor, because in the Senate we have a slim majority, and hopefully it will be Delegate Ayala, and she will be breaking ties on abortion rights, and whether people have access to reproductive health care, and whether or not, people can decide when, how, and if they want to start a family, workers' rights, voters' rights, you name it. And it's all going to come through the General Assembly. In 2 short months, we take on thousands of bills that will affect people, daily life for a very long time. And I like to tell people that don't get so caught up on the federal level, because there's checks and balances there. What the president does may or may not affect you, but I can guarantee you that what we do in the General Assembly, it will impact your life every day, guaranteed, beginning July 1st. So that's why these races are so important. And that's why we have to keep the majority and expand it, especially in the House of Delegates.
So one issue in particular that I know has been very prevalent in the news lately across Virginia, but across the nation also, is education. And I know there's been some kerfluffle on the gubernatorial race in particular about education, and things said and things that were taken out of context, in context regardless. So let's talk about what do Democrats plan to do for education? What are some of the things some of our candidates are talking about? And what are some ways in which they're looking to improve education in Virginia?
Well, always for education, our top agenda is always increasing teacher pay. I had teachers in my district that were working 2 jobs, working at the local Applebee's and supplement to their teaching job, just to be able to sustain themselves in Northern Virginia. In one of my elementary schools, Whitewater Elementary, we lost, I want to say, around 20, 25 teachers in 1 year. And it is a phenomenal elementary school. But the issue is the pay. And it's not just the pay, but it's the bureaucracy as well. I'm hearing from teachers that even if you increase my pay, it's still not enough for me to be in the classroom doing what I love and what I went to school to do, and I'm trained to do, which is to teach children, because it's being with them. I'm IEP meetings, I'm on bus duty, I'm on lunch duty. My contract time is an 8-hour day, it's a 10-hour day, because all these other meetings and things have taken up. So now I got to take work home, right? So now we actually pay them less than what we think we pay them. And they're just bearing the brunt of all of this, all of these unfunded mandates and these things that we require of them to be, counselors and therapists. And, so what we really need a teacher-centric, teacher-focused policy that we pass here in Virginia. And it's not only about uplifting pay, which we need to do, which we've never done. We need to pay them at least the national average, which we have failed to do every single year. But then we also need to give them the resources that they require in order to provide our kids with a world-class education. So it's also making sure that we increase the supplements that we're giving to schools, because our schools are not equal. And the poor schools, or the schools that have children with lower socioeconomic status attending, or high IEPs, or high children with all different types of needs, they need more money, because we're not talking about equality, we're talking about equity. And we're talking about equity, we're talking about kids who are behind the line. They need more just to catch up, to get to the line, and then to have, a fair start. So all of these things are in the works, and we have passed a lot of legislation to help get us where we need to be. I'm really proud to say that, I've helped to lead the charge on ending disorderly conduct as a criminal charge for our children in our schools, because there was a kid who was close to my district, and he kicked a trash can, and he was a child with a developmental disability, and he was charged with disorderly conduct, a criminal charge for kicking a trash can. These minor offenses that are childhood, disciplinary issues are being treated as criminal offenses. And as a former public defender, I could tell you that once we get a child in the system, it's almost impossible to get them out. Right. So we fail them before they get a chance to start. So education is so important, but education ties along to our juvenile justice system and how we treat our children, especially our children with disabilities and Black and brown children, and how we overcriminalize and penalize their behavior, making sure that we work the system.
So speaking of the school to prison pipeline, the research has shown that you're not only penalizing that child, but it's such a cost to our criminal justice system. It's such a cost to our health system, our taxes, like everything. It costs more money to incarcerate that child. And then, like you said, like have them in the system. It's hard to get them out. So, I mean, what's the solution there? Like, what are some of the things that we should be doing instead of incarcerating our children? Like, how do we invest in them instead of incarcerating them?
So one of the things that we definitely need to do is, address poverty. At the end of the day, when we talk about gun violence, we're talking about juvenile justice and juvenile delinquency. What we're really talking about is poverty. Because at the end of the day, I've seen firsthand that a lot of the charges, such as petty theft, meaning someone walking in a store and taking something, is usually because it is indigency related. When you talk about, gun violence, it's usually indigency related. When all of these things are definitely interrelated, and poverty is in its essence one of the most unethical, immoral issues that we have going on right now that we have failed to address. So we'll sometimes nibble at the edges, but we won't put forth policies that will really uplift millions of families and children who are in poverty in a real way. So if we address poverty, we'll be able to address juvenile justice. We'll be able to address gun violence. We'll be able to address a lot of these petty crimes and thefts and things that happen in our Commonwealth. So at the end of the day, when I see a child and he's going, and I've had a client who walked in, he was about 12 and it was the middle of winter, and he walked into a store. He had a light shirt on, thin pants, walked into a store, put a jacket, a big coat on, and walked out. And because that coat was over $200 at the time, he was charged with a felony.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here as his public defender trying to figure out how I'm going to keep this child from being a convicted felon. But at the end of the day, it's not the child who needs to be on trial. Yeah. It is really his parents, because his father was nowhere to be found and his mom was suffering from a drug addiction and there was negligence going on. Who should really be on trial were the teachers, because no one noticed that the only meals that he ate was the breakfast and lunch he received at school, and he had worn the same outfit for several days in a row, and it was snow on the ground, and all he had was a thin shirt on his back. Who should be on trial is the system, because it's a child in need of services, not a child in need of a criminal conviction. So those are the challenges and the issues that we have in our system. And as long as we continue to penalize and only look at the symptoms and not the cause or the root cause of our problems, we'll continue to, have these perpetual cycles of these things happening and won't really solve the problem. So it really goes back to making sure that our criminal justice system is in alignment with age appropriate, disciplinary actions, that we move the criminality out of it. If children, get into some type of trouble, let the experts deal with it. The people who have been trained, such as the administrative staff, the teachers, the principal. That's what used to happen. If someone in my class talked back to the teacher, that gets into the principal's office, not to jail. Yeah. And so we changed how we deal with our children, and we criminalize normal childhood behavior in a way that's excessive. That's why we have some of the highest incarceration rates in the world. So making sure that things are appropriate, the right people are taking up the issues that are happening in school, and we actually reform our juvenile justice system and figure out what's happening with that child, and then treat the problem, not just the symptoms. So that child is in need of wraparound services. The mom needs drug rehabilitation and treatment. She needs help finding a new job and a better job so she can afford her child to be able to wear a coat to take to school. That's how you fix that problem. And then you've addressed everything, the mom, the family, and you've pretty much helped end perpetual generational poverty and criminality in that one effort. But we just have to revamp the way that we think about juvenile justice, criminality, poverty. All of these things are interrelated, and school discipline.
And I think it's important how you link them all together, because at the core of it, this is the Democratic platform, right? Our job as Democrats, and people say this, I mean, this is a known thing, that we like to take care of people. We take care of society as a whole. We care for people. And so what we're trying to push forth is in education. We're trying to reform our education system to empower teachers, to empower parents, to empower students, and to make sure that staff have what they need, and that the teachers have what's required of them, so that they can actually focus on their job and educate these students. And your point about the larger societal issues, we spend so much money taking kids from their parents for neglect, for For neglect in particular, because neglect is often, to your point, it's because people can't afford to do the things that other people can, or they have multiple jobs, and so they have to leave their child with someone else. So if we try to solve the root cause, which a lot of these policies that the Democrats have put forward in the last, since we've had the majority, but since we've had more power in the General Assembly, that's really at the root of what we're trying to do. And that's why, getting back to this election, if we don't have people in power who care about people as a whole and not just, individuals, then we're going to perpetuate this cycle of intergenerational poverty. We're going to perpetuate this cycle of looking out for just yourself and hoping someone else takes care of other people. And we can't, and if we want to be a society that actually brings people up and moves people ahead so we can all succeed, we have to change our mindset. And I think, getting back to the point about Democrats in this election, that's what's really at stake at the end of the day. It's not just about your individual rights, my individual rights, but let's talk about how what we do and how we work together can make us all better, so then in the long run we all benefit from it.
That's right. And then just piggybacking on that, that's one of the things I love about this cycle right now, because we have so many, everyday people running for office. You have Elizabeth Guzman. She is a social worker. You have people like Deborah Gardner. She has worked with everyone from people suffering from or victims of domestic violence to mental illness to substance abuse, the youth and the senior citizens. So she brings that wealth of experience to the table when she's advocating for people. You know who she's going to fight for, right? That's what matters. I mean, you continue to have these legacies and these people who come from wealth, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I believe lived experience is more valuable as a legislator than anything else, because then you are able to bring other things to bear. You're able to talk about why it's important to, tax the wealthiest amongst us, because poor people pay more than the top 1%. It's expensive to be poor in Commonwealth and in our country. They pay higher interest rates. They pay more of a percentage of their income on food and gas and everything else that we pay. And it's only fair and the right thing to do that everyone pays their fair share. So people who come from big corporations and, the top 1%, they may disagree that I want to pay less and I think I should because I'm privileged and I worked hard to get to where I am. That's true. But just like this other person worked hard as well to not maybe make as much money, but fair is fair and right is right, right? We should tax, not just work, but wealth as well, because that's how we'll ensure that everybody gets to succeed in this country and in this Commonwealth. So that's why I'm so excited about all the people who are running, bringing it back to this election, because these are people who are boots on the ground. These are people understanding the struggles that everyday Virginians are facing. These are the people who have gone, who have worked multiple jobs, gone without health insurance. So that when they have to make the hard votes and the hard decisions about what's right, you don't have to question which side they're going to fall on. Yeah.
And that's why we're here, right? We're here to make sure that everyone who's out there who hasn't yet voted, because many of us have already voted. I know I voted. I like to get out there early. That's the other thing that Democrats have done. We've made it so that you don't need an excuse to vote in Virginia. I don't understand why you need an excuse to vote early in anywhere. And I've come from some restrictive places. I was in Indiana last year, and they don't have early vote, like no excuse early voting. Like you can't, let's talk about the reasons for that. I mean, there are a lot of them. So I think that it's important that we remember that these elections matter. They matter more than our national elections in a lot of ways, because they impact our daily lives. So between our state elections and our local elections, that covers probably like 80% of what we do in a given day and how we spend our money and where our money will go, because that dictates what goes on in our communities. So I want to talk about we've talked a little bit about about why this is important. I want to talk more about that in the second segment. But before we get there, what would you say to going back to apathy, what would you say to someone who, let's say I've had this conversation, a Black woman says to me, why should I vote for Terry McAuliffe, Hala Ayala, and Mark Herring? I mean, my vote would be rewarding them for not having a Black person on the ballot. And let's just say, like, this is the perception that's out there, whether it's right or wrong, that's the perception. So what do you say to them? They're like, well, I might as well vote for the Republican because I'm not going to reward the Democrats for continuing this pattern. Like, how do we answer that question?
Mm-hmm. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? You don't cut your nose off to spite your face. I mean, those are things that I've heard in the South for a very long time. But in this essence, it means, you may not be able to get all that you want. It may not have been your person to win the nomination, but at the end of the day, Democrats, we hold ourselves to a standard, and that's a standard of ensuring that people have access to abortion care and reproductive health care. Hard stop. That as Democrats, we are a party of the working people, meaning that we believe in increasing the minimum wage, paid family medical leave, paid sick days, ensuring that more people could work one job and put food on the table, that everyone should pay their fair share. When you're talking about the environment right now, I mean, it is literally one of the warmest, falls that we have ever had in history. I know we are breaking records at the end of the day. And we need a party that is going to believe in science fact and not science fiction. And that is the Democratic Party. So at the end of the day, we have to support Democrats, right? The primary is over, and we all have to come together and galvanize behind our nominee, because it is true. The alternative is not an option. We need Democrats in office. So while we're not all monolithic, we all don't believe in the same thing and the same policies, or even necessarily how to get to where we need to go. At the end of the day, our North Star is still fairness, equality, and justice. And that is what can be said for the Democratic Party. I don't know what we say about the Republican Party. They are a party who are lost. The John McCain Republicans of old are nowhere to be found, unfortunately. And most of them are subscribing to Trumpism, which is dangerous and divisive. And so we cannot allow that to predominate our culture, the media, society. So it has to be a hard stop. And the hard stop is with Virginia, because what people know is that Virginia is the bellwether for what's going to happen in oncoming midterms. People also see it as a referendum on how the president is doing and Congress. And, I am always the optimist. And I believe that, we can get good things that happen and come out of an administration that is dominated by the Democrats. We've done it in the past, and we'll continue to do it. The environment wins, the economy wins when Democrats are in power.
Well, thank you, Jen. We're going to take a quick break right now, but stay with us as we continue our conversation about the 2020 general elections here in Virginia and why this election and tomorrow's election in particular is so important.
Freedom. It's at the core of who we are. The freedom to live without fear, to jog where we please, to wear a hoodie. The freedom to breathe. Before we celebrate the freedom most Americans have, we must fight for the freedom all Americans deserve. Because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
STEM is the discipline of hard numbers, precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to get messy, or just mess it up. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to try. Dare to fail. Dare to keep daring. Dare to learn the difference between organic, sedimentary, and non-foliated metamorphic rock. Get outside, find those rocks. Dare to be homeroom famous, a high school fable. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. And for the love of STEM, dare bigger. Dare to code, dare to invent, dare to explore, dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Your blood pressure numbers could change your life. Talk to your doctor about creating a plan that works better for you. Start taking the right steps at manageyourbp.org.
It's time to make an informed decision about COVID-19 vaccines. The dangerous new Delta variant is more than twice as contagious as the original virus and can affect anyone. Right now, 9 out of 10 hospitalizations and deaths from COVID are among unvaccinated people. Getting vaccinated might save your life, and there's now an option that's fully approved by the FDA. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. Tonight I'm talking with Jennifer Carroll Foy, former delegate of Virginia's 2nd District and leader of Virginia for Everyone PAC. Jennifer was also a candidate in the Democratic primary for governor of Virginia this past July. So Jennifer, I'll bring you back to this conversation. Let's continue where we left off and talk a little bit more about some of the races that are being run this cycle, not just the 3 statewide races of governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, but all of the House of Delegates seats are up for re-election this year, or up for election this year. And I think it was only 2 out of the 100 are not actually, there's actual election. So let's talk about some of those candidates. Like who's running for office right now? Who are some of the candidates that need our support?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to start with Delegate Josh Cole. I mean, Delegate Josh Cole, he ran the first time, and because of incorrect ballots being given to some of his what should have been constituents, because we have split precincts, he unfortunately did not win, and it was only by a handful of votes. But he came back, and in 2019, with so much great support, he was able to make it to a finish line. But he is in an R+, I think 6 or 7 districts. And so we have to know and make sure that we're showing up for Josh Cole, because he is a true progressive. He believes in making sure that, you know, we increase the minimum wage like we should, that we are protecting our LGBTQ plus community, that we're advancing affordable housing. I mean, you name it, and he's there on the front line. So I'm excited to support his race in a big way. Virginia for Everyone, we're knocking doors, we're doing whatever we can, the fundraisers for him, because we have to bring him back. You also have great races, like I mentioned before, Deborah Gardner. That is a sleeper. A lot of people weren't necessarily focusing on that race in a big way, but I think that is going to be a miss. That is a pickup that we should have. The person who ran in that district before, Larry, he only lost the 2 elections before that by, I think, around 200 votes each year. So that is something that we can definitely remedy this go around and make sure we get those extra 300 people to the polls and that they go vote. And then there's also Katie Sponsler in the Chesterfield area. That would be an amazing pickup. It's the former Speaker of the House seat. But I believe that if we talk to the Democrats in the area and turn them out, give them a reason to show up, remind them that November 2nd is here, then we can pick that seat up as well. And you know, also, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, you know, people like in my own backyard, Brianna Sewell and Michelle Maldonado. And you also have Candy King in Prince William County, because where Prince William County goes, so goes Virginia. So those are wonderful, dynamic Black women candidates who are out here fighting the good fight, advancing our issues, talking about education and funding, affordable housing, affordable health care. And, you know, we have to bring Candy King back so she can win her reelection, and also bring along Michelle and Brianna to join her down in the General Assembly, because Black women matter. And Black women
do. Let's reiterate that Black women matter very much.
Absolutely. And so getting behind them in a big way, knocking the doors, doing the fundraisers, writing the checks for them. That's what, you know, we've done with Virginia for Everyone. That's what so many other great Democratic organizations across this country is doing as well, to ensure that they successfully make it over the finish line. And lastly, I want to talk about Wendy Goditis, and also Rodney Willett. These are 2 of the most amazing people you ever want to meet. And they have hard races. They are in what is traditionally thought of as Republican seats, but they are fantastic legislators, amazing individuals and people, and they are in this for the right reasons. So we need their voice down in Richmond. So if you're in Rodney Willett's district or Wendy Goditis, make sure you show up, because this is not a sure thing. And these are what could be Republican seats, and just as quickly as we want them, we can lose them. So make sure you show up and vote definitely for those 2 as well.
And not just yourself. Go out and make sure that anyone that you know in those areas will go out and vote. I mentioned to someone before that family members of mine are getting mailers because, you know, we're Black, and we get mailers from out of state reminding us to go vote. I've already voted, so they stopped mailing me. But there are a lot of organizations that are pouring money into Virginia right now because we need to get out the vote. Like, there's a real need for Democrats to show up and vote. And I mean, our voting history has told them that we are Democrats. So you need to go out there and you need to go vote, because when we vote, we win.
That's right.
And so we have to continue to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And one more, Kelly Fowler. Fowler, cannot forget about my girl, Kelly Fowler in Virginia Beach. She has a difficult race as well. She's, you know, several young babies. She has 2 jobs, a whole husband, and she is trying to make it happen out here. So, I mean, I need everyone to show up in Virginia Beach, and it is a hard place to run and win as a Democrat, especially when you are progressive. And she is all of those things and more. And we really need to show support and love to Kelly Fowler as well.
Well, yes, Kelly, good luck in your race. And you're probably out canvassing or doing something.
Or breastfeeding.
Or breastfeeding, because you have kids. And that's a thing now. Thanks to Kathy Tran for breastfeeding on the House floor. So now we can all do that. So getting back to why we should be supporting these folks. So down the line, we've seen that when we elect Democrats to office, the state as a whole benefits from it. And so we need to continue to do that. So what are some of the issues right now that are top on people's minds as they're out there on the polls? You mentioned a little bit earlier when you're going out and knocking doors, but what are the things that we should be focusing on to tell our friends and family and neighbors and our folks across the state, like, this is why you need to go out and vote? So what are some of those issues that we're talking to that people are getting excited about?
Yeah, so you would think it'd be these national headline issues, but it's really, you know, just education, economy, COVID. That's it. That's what I keep hearing over and over and over again. It's not really the gun debate right now. It's not, you know, really anything else. It's really that simple: education, economy, COVID, because those are the things that impact their people's everyday life that, you know, we need the most help with, and they're all interrelated. And these are the people who want to know, you know, what's your plan as Democrats going forward? How will you improve education? How will you make sure that when my child leaves for school every day, that I'm going to make sure that my child comes back, right? How is it that we're going to end segregated schools in Virginia? Because the education in places like Portsmouth and Petersburg and Pulaski is different than the education in Alexandria, Arlington, and Loudoun County. And that should not be. If we say we're going to prepare our children with a world-class education, it has to be that way, no matter where you live, how much is in your paycheck, or what area code you're in. Hard stop. And that's not true. And so what are we doing in order to ensure that that happens and we make that a reality for Virginia families? With the economy, there are still people who are looking for jobs. There are people who are refusing to go back to their jobs because they say, I cannot afford childcare and transportation on, you know, $9 an hour in Northern Virginia. It's just not a reality. So it actually costs me money to go to work every day. How are we ensuring that these people can go back to work and work one job and put food on the table, to be able to afford to live in Arlington and Alexandria and not have to commute, you know, 40, 50 miles, contributing to traffic congestion and, you know, and climate change and everything else, because we won't put in common solutions like upzoning and ensuring there's more affordable housing so people can afford to live where they work. And of course, then there's COVID. And COVID is something that should be so nonpartisan. But we have managed to politicize everything from mental health to education to COVID. But you know, unless we defeat this invisible enemy called COVID-19, we're not going to really be able to move our economy and our country forward. So what are the plans that Democrats have in place? Well, I can tell you we've already quickly and safely reopened our schools. We've avoided a huge eviction tsunami that many people forecast was on the horizon. And we did that because we put resources in place to get it to the people who need it the most. Not only that, but we created more safety nets. You know, I don't know why people feel like it's so okay. And, you know, big corporations and businesses are entitled to safety nets. And we call it, you know, different things. But when it's a safety net for everyday workers and people and family, then it's a problem. And so we did that here in Virginia, but it was Democrats who did it. And in order for us to continue to do it, we have to continue to be in office. And that's why you have to go vote today.
So if you didn't catch that, viewers, go vote. By the time you see, I mean, you're seeing this now and it's too late to vote, but Tuesday, go out and vote Tuesday. Find your polling place, go to the State Board of Elections, and you can find your polling place there and go vote, because it's very, very important. I mean, one of the things we've noticed in this election is that this is basically, as you mentioned before, a test ground for what the midterm elections are going to be. So we need to show the country that Democrats are the right choice, because we've gotten us out of a pandemic, or we're improving the economy. We have stability in the White House. That should be number one. I should say that number one, because the instability of the last 4 years has really contributed so greatly to our economic depression, to the exacerbation of this pandemic, and to me as a woman feeling just despondent because, I mean, look at that guy. Thankfully, he's no longer there. So I think that it really does behoove us to make sure that we are going out there, making sure that we're voting, and making sure we're putting in office the people who actually represent our best interests and not their own. And I like your point about welfare for corporations. It's not called welfare for corporations; it's called tax cuts. But when you give programs to low-income families, to children, then it's called welfare and entitlement programs. But no one says anything when they get their Social Security check when they talk about entitlement programs, right? No one says anything about SSI when they talk about entitlement programs. Give me my money. I put into the system, so give it back to me. So these are things that we sometimes lose sight of as we talk about these kind of programs. But that's why we have Democrats, right? And I am unabashedly a Democrat. I am progressive in my values, but I'm also I have common sense. Like, if I help you, I don't lose anything. We all benefit from it, and no matter who you are. So I believe in paying my fair taxes, but also I love it when my business makes money. So it's good all around.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about the House of Delegates and the importance of all of the races that are going on. So every person in Virginia, every voter in Virginia has a choice for their House of Delegates member, the Attorney General, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Governor. We talked a little bit about what they do, but I want to talk more about the importance of having an Attorney General in Virginia who believes in the kind of policies and ideals that we hold dear. I know Mark Herring has been a stalwart to push forward progressive ideas and values. So let's talk a little bit more about what's at stake in that election. What are you hearing out there, and what are some of the things that folks are talking about statewide in terms of the AG's race?
Yeah, so I have to say that a lot of people, know Attorney General Mark Herring. He's been there for 8 years now, and they love the job that he's been doing. I mean, he has supported the Equal Rights Amendment and supported our efforts, added to the petition to ensure that the archivist records Virginia as the 38th and final state needed to enshrine women's equality into the United States Constitution. And he's joining the efforts and making sure that we remove, or notwithstanding the timeline that was arbitrarily placed in the preamble of the Equal Rights Amendment, that it will not stop the Equal Rights Amendment from ratifying and being a part of the United States Constitution, hopefully next year. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that he supports gay marriage, and he has also helped hold the line to make sure that we have gay marriage here in Virginia and throughout this country, that it is acknowledged, it is respected, and we're moving forward on LGBTQ plus rights. So all of these things in conjunction with all of the great work he is doing, and his messaging is also excellent, making sure that people know about the good work that you're doing. It has made it a lighter lift for us to make the case that Attorney General Mark Herring needs to continue to be our head lawyer here in the Commonwealth, protecting us all from bad policies and bad laws.
Yes, I think it's very important, because we do forget that the Attorney General does make a difference in terms of the laws that they enforce and the laws that they choose not to enforce. Because there are some laws in the books that are more harmful than they are good. And so having an Attorney General with the discretion to know the difference, to know what's too pernicious and what is actually just, I think is very important. So I thank you for highlighting the work that he's done. And again, we have to remember, we have to vote for him, because if we do not, then all of these protections that we have can go away. because he's the one that's his team and his lawyers and his Commonwealth's attorneys are going to be the ones who fight this fight, and we need to make sure that they're able to do that. We talked a little bit about the lieutenant governor. Lieutenant governor breaks the tie in the Virginia Senate. What are some of the things that we have to be concerned about there? What are some of the things that we think are coming down the pipe that she's going to need to step in on? And I do say she because Hala's going to win. That's right.
And so at the end of the day, it depends on, what she does or how much she does on, who, if we keep the House, who the governor is. But at the end of the day, Lieutenant's job is very clear. She is a tiebreaker in the Senate. And with us having such a slim majority, she will come into play. I know Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, he broke ties. I believe it was on the Equal Rights Amendment. I believe it was on Medicaid expansion. It was a number of policies that he voted in favor of that was a part of our Democratic platform, things that will bring healthcare to 400,000 people, to make the Equal Rights Amendment closer to being a reality here in our Commonwealth. All of these things are important and that he played a part in, and that will be what Delegate Hala does as our next lieutenant governor. She'll also be able to use her bully pulpit to push for policies that's important. So while she herself can't put in legislation, what she can do is travel the Commonwealth of Virginia, energizing and exciting people about paid family medical leave, which is something she champions. Also ensuring that we're fighting for workers and making sure that voting rights are protected. And we do even more to protect the vote. So those are the things that she'll be able to do as well, being a figurehead and spokesperson for Virginia, also selling us as the best place in the country to live, work, and raise a family, helping bring jobs and here to our Commonwealth, assimilate our economy, while also fighting for workers as well. All of these things in conjunction makes her a dynamic person to be our next lieutenant governor.
And one thing that we can't forget to mention is that as the first female person of color to be lieutenant governor, she's going to be the role model for boys and girls across the Commonwealth, no matter what their race or ethnicity is. I mean, they'll have her to look up to and say, look, anyone can do it. I mean, like, I could do it, you could do it, my brother can do it, doesn't matter. It's an open position. I think we forget the importance of that for our children, not just our Black and brown children, but children across the board, to see representation in all levels of government. And I think breaking that glass ceiling will be very important, and I think it'll be very inspiring for a number of folks, and not just a number of folks, but for people across the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. We've got to get her in office. Either way, we'll have a woman of color, but Hala's my girl, so let's make sure she gets in office.
I would love for that woman of color to be a Democrat.
I would love for that woman of color to be a Democrat.
That's right. But you're right, Zakiya. I mean, representation matters. It's hard to be what you can't see. Mm-hmm. And even though in 2021, I mean, I'm frustrated that we're still talking about the first of anything. Yes. But those barriers have to be broken down and make it easier for the people coming behind them to make it a reality and to make it happen. So in the former Capital Confederacy, we're going to get this done. There will be a Black woman as our next lieutenant governor here in Virginia. We're just fighting for her to have the right values, mm-hmm. And for it to be a Democrat. So you got to show up and vote to make sure that happens.
Yes. If you haven't heard it yet on this program, go vote. So in the last office that I want to tackle is the governor's office. And people, I think, have the best idea of what the governor does and what the importance is. But I don't think they actually understand what the importance of a governor in a divided or a closely or in a General Assembly that's closer than there isn't really a solid majority or supermajority, as you mentioned. So the governor really does make a difference, because the governor is the one that has veto power. So while we had all the statewide offices before we had the majority in the General Assembly, we had Democratic governors who stopped bad things from happening. Now we have a chance for them to help push forward that progress and put in a budget and all those sorts of things. So tell me a little bit more about what having a Democrat as the governor will do for us here in Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. So a Democratic governor, it depends on what the House looks like, but Terry McAuliffe has been in this position before where he's had to veto a number of bad bills that were put on his table that would, hurt people's access to abortion care and reproductive rights, that would have attacked LGBTQ plus community, that would have waged another war on women. I mean, talk about access to reproductive care. I mean, some of the Republicans don't want people to have access to birth control, let alone abortion care, when you're talking about the environment, not putting in any type of standards that's going to protect our children and create have a legacy for them to live and to breathe clean air and clean water. So he's fought this battle before, going against a Republican controlled or divided General Assembly, and they've been able to beat back a lot of bad bills, which is what we need to happen. We do not want harm to happen to Virginia families, and that's what he'd been able to hold the ground and make sure that didn't happen. But if it is a Democratic trifecta, which we are all hoping for, then we'll be able to advance some of our most ambitious and progressive proposals and policies that we've been able to talk about. We'll be able to make them a reality and ensure that we uplift millions of workers and women and families throughout Virginia in a real way. Because again, what the General Assembly does affects you July 1st of every single year. So you'll see it in your paycheck. You'll see it on, the paving of the roads. You're not sitting in traffic for 2 hours going 20 miles. The standards in your child's school getting better, smaller student to teacher ratios. All of these things can happen and will happen if we have a Democratic trifecta and we're able to execute our will and look at our wish list and our promise list and actually make it a reality here in Virginia. So the governor has the ability to not only set the tone and tenor for who we are as Virginians and what we stand for, but also use the budget as well. So we hopefully will get millions of dollars trickling into Virginia from the federal government, and how that money is allocated and appropriated. The governor will have a huge say in that because his budget will dictate and help lead the General Assembly and what our priorities are. So whether or not teachers continue to get, money so we can get our children back to where they need to be because they've been sheltered in place for almost, 2 years. So that loss of learning is real, and making sure that those deficits in their education and their learning is addressed in a real way. We'll be able to get that done if we have a Democratic governor who will allocate the money appropriately. Whether or not we continue to stave off any type of eviction tsunami that we have. I mean, let's be honest. There is the potential for thousands of people to be homeless in a matter of months if we don't continue to put the resources to prevent that from happening, so people can continue to have a safe place to rest their head. When you talk about the senior citizens and making prescription pills more affordable, I mean, all of these things are up for grabs, and the governor will have a tremendous say-so. Legalization of marijuana, who gets those licenses? Right? Making sure that the money is invested in the communities that's been most hurt and harmed by the war on drugs and over policing and all of these things. Again, the governor will have a huge say in how money is allocated, licenses are given, what commissions how the commissions are created, and what voices are brought to bear on how we create the policies that will dictate, one of the biggest social justice issues of our time, right? So all of these things are rolled up into one individual, one position, and that is the next governor of Virginia. So we can't leave it to risk for a Republican governor who continues to, spread, election conspiracy theories, who's already said he doesn't support gay marriage in 2021, who's made it very clear that one of the first things he'll try to do is to make it impossible for people to have any choice in how, if, and when they start a family. And force people to carry pregnancies to term. That is not who we are as Virginians. That's not what we want. So we have to make that very clear. And that's why this election is so important. You have a voice, and your voice is your vote. And that's why you have to execute it, because you can't complain if you don't try to make an impact on this election and bring real change. And that's only by having Terry McAuliffe as governor, Hala Ayala as lieutenant governor, Mark Herring as attorney general, and voting blue all the way down the ballot.
So for those of you who haven't yet gone to vote, you can find your polling location at elections.virginia.gov. On that page, you'll be able to see where you need to go vote. Most of us know where we need to vote, but just in case you need the reminder, it's elections.virginia.gov. So we have a couple minutes left in tonight's program. I do want to come back to you, Jennifer, and talk a little bit more. I want to thank you for the work that you've done this cycle, because you put your heart and soul into that campaign, and you've taken that energy and you've continued it since the primary to help elect Democrats. And I know you've done so much to bring up the people of Virginia, and I know you've done so much to bring up candidates of color in particular. And I appreciate that, because as we talk about, representation matters, not just to those who look like the person, but to others to see that this is that people of all backgrounds, types can be in positions of power and can represent us. So first of all, thank you so much for that. If you want to take a minute, give us a little preview about what you plan to be doing in the next little bit with the work you're doing here in Virginia, and then we can close out and remind people to go vote again.
Absolutely. So what we're doing now is we're ensuring that all hands are on deck. We are in key districts, making sure that these delegates successfully make it over the finish line, because we have to hold the House, keep the House, and we have our eyes set on the supermajority. So we're trying to pick up a couple seats. And in order to do that, we have to invest in grassroots organizing, because that is the way to win. That is a surefire way to ensure that people have a plan, take a friend, and go vote, which is what this election is all about. Everything is at stake. Everything is on the line. And again, all of our progressive gains can be rolled back in a matter of moments. And we can have an unrecognizable Virginia if the Republicans are able to win this election. So with my Virginia for Everyone PAC, we are knocking thousands of doors across this Commonwealth, supporting candidates from corner to corner, doing fundraisers, events, everything we can. And we are right here in the home stretch. So we are not letting up. We are not taking our foot off the gas. We are still knocking doors every single day from dawn till dusk, making sure that the right thing happened on November 2nd, because we have to leave it all on the field. Nothing up to chance. We won't do another name out of a bowl. We are going to make sure that we win, and we win big. And so that's why I want to thank all the great Democratic orgs in Virginia and outside Virginia who are having real impact, helping the statewide and these delegate and down ballot races bring home the win in the next couple of hours. That's how much time we have. So don't leave it up to chance. You know, like Obama said, don't boo, go vote, right? Because that is our power. There's one place, you know, in this world where the man who sweeps the floor at Amazon is just as powerful as the billionaire, trillionaire who owns it. And that is at the voting booth. So you have to make sure that you assert your power, that you own your voice, and that you go vote on November 2nd in just a couple of hours.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. And thank you for watching, those of you out there. Jennifer, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to talking with you again soon. And thank you for taking time out of being a mom tonight. I know your little ones are excited to have you back, so I'll let you get back to them in a moment. But thank you again. And to those watching, thank you for watching the show tonight, but please go vote. We say that it's important because it is. If it wasn't important, people wouldn't work so hard to try to take your vote away from you. So thank you again for Jennifer for your time with us tonight. Thank you all for watching. Please make sure to go vote if you have not already voted. You can find your polling places at elections.virginia.gov. And have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.